In 1816, a London merchant's son named Francis Ronalds began a series of electrical experiments in his Hammersmith back garden. He constructed a massive testing framework, suspending 8 miles of iron wire through the open air above his property. To protect the system from the elements, he soon modified the design, routing the conductive iron wire through thick glass tubes and burying them deep underground. This sprawling physical infrastructure had a singular purpose: to transmit specific letters and numbers across vast distances instantly. Encouraged by the Swiss meteorologist Jean-André Deluc, Ronalds was attempting to build a fully functional electric telegraph. The sheer scale of his Hammersmith setup proved a crucial concept. Long-distance communication was mechanically possible without relying on a direct visual line of sight between the sender and the receiver. Unlike the electrical telegraphs that would dominate the late 19th century, Ronalds's design did not rely on interrupted electrical pulses or complex rhythmic codes. Instead, his entire system was driven by an active, continuous stream of high-voltage static charge coursing through it. He maintained this baseline electrical state using a frictional electricity machine, which constantly fed static electricity into the buried wires. The electrical current itself contained no specific information. The continuous charge acted as a simple binary trigger across the entire network. Either the system was charged or it wasn't. To actually translate that binary electrical state into readable data, Ronalds had to introduce a precisely engineered mechanical component, a pair of synchronized clockwork dials. The system worked because it paired a basic electrical reaction with rigid mechanical synchronization. This diagram shows the required mechanical setup. At each end of the line, Ronalds placed 2 identical circular dials, completely engraved with the alphabet and a set of numbers. Behind each dial sat an independent, continuously running clockwork mechanism, forcing the discs to constantly rotate. He then placed a stationary cover over each dial, featuring a single cutout window, restricting the view so only one character was visible at any given moment. For the entire system to function, these 2 independent clockwork engines had to be calibrated to rotate at the exact same speed. If the internal mechanisms drifted even slightly out of step with one another, the resulting transmission would be entirely unreadable. But as long as the clockworks kept perfect time, the sender and receiver were mathematically guaranteed to be looking at the exact same letter simultaneously. With the mechanics locked in step, we can look at the electrical state of the system while it sits idle. The diagram illustrates the baseline condition. The frictional electricity machine applies a continuous charge to the entire length of the buried wire. At the receiving station, 2 highly conductive, lightweight spheres, known as pith balls, hang suspended from the main wire by thin silk threads. Because they connect to the main line, both spheres absorb the exact same electrostatic charge. The laws of electrostatics dictate that identically charged objects physically repel one another. The incoming charge forces the hanging spheres to push apart. As long as the pith balls remain repelled, the receiver knows the 8-mile line is fully charged, synchronized, and waiting for a signal. Transmitting a specific letter required precise timing from the sender. The sending operator watches their local, continuously spinning dial, waiting for the exact moment their target letter aligns with the open window on the mask. The instant the desired letter appears, the sender forcefully drives a metallic rod into the earth, grounding the main wire. Grounding the line instantly dissipates the static voltage across the entire 8-mile circuit. Without that continuous voltage holding them apart, the 2 pith balls at the receiving station instantly drop and collide. That physical collision is the definitive visual cue to the receiving operator. Upon seeing the spheres drop, the receiver immediately looks at their own synchronized dial and records whichever single character is visible in their window at that exact fraction of a second. The primary limitation of this setup was the comparative slowness required to spell out long messages. Operators had to wait for the entire clockwork cycle to rotate before sending the next character. Yet the engineering logic was sound. Data transmitted not by an active pulse, but through the precise, timed interruption of a continuous electrical state. Convinced of the system's practical value, Ronalds formally offered his complete telegraph design to the British Admiralty in 1816. In his proposal, he argued the mechanism could be scaled up to operate reliably over distances of 800 kilometers, creating an instant communications link between government offices in London and naval ports in Portsmouth. The Admiralty's response was swift and dismissive. Secretary John Barrow issued an official rejection, politely informing Ronalds that telegraphs of any kind were wholly unnecessary. Only a year after the conclusion of the Napoleonic Wars, the Admiralty saw no reason to upgrade their communications, choosing instead to rely entirely on the mechanical semaphore networks they already had in place. That existing semaphore infrastructure was heavily flawed. Because it relied on operators physically seeing wooden flags in the distance, it was useless at night or during poor weather. Ronalds' electrical solution, protected by buried glass tubes, was entirely immune to foggy climates and darkness. Institutional satisfaction with an inferior visual system stalled the governmental adoption of weather-independent electrical communication. Following this rejection, Ronalds abandoned his efforts to secure a patent for the electric telegraph and left England to travel the continent. But his work was not entirely forgotten. A young boy named Charles Wheatstone had witnessed the Hammersmith experiments firsthand. 2 decades later, alongside William Fothergill Cooke, Wheatstone devised and patented the first publicly used commercial electric telegraph in England in 1837. During a bitter patent priority dispute in 1855, Wheatstone explicitly acknowledged his debt to those early trials, confirming that the concept of using synchronously rotating discs was entirely Ronalds's invention. Ronalds himself had already pivoted to a different scientific field. By 1843, he was serving as the honorary director and superintendent of the Kew Meteorological Observatory. There, he applied his deep expertise in mechanical and electrical engineering to invent a camera-based system that automatically recorded continuous meteorological data. This video is brought to you by the IELTS FOCUS, Zalo 0847-705-973, an English center specializing in IELTS preparation. The automated photographic systems Ronalds implemented at Kew remained the standard for recording meteorological data for years after his death, validating the mechanical-electrical logic he first tested in his Hammersmith garden.